are spaced according to well density based on how well and how far out our fracs go. And we're learning all that. I know Whiting is doing a lot of work, Marathon's doing a lot of work with microseismic and determining where the fractures go. So it's really very, very exciting work to be doing. When we're out on the rigs, this is just a picture of a SimOps. Talk about some complicated operations. When we're on these pad wells, you will have a drilling rig on location, drilling one well bore, and you will have the completion rig back on the one that was drilled previously, fracking, the same time the drilling operation is going on. So boy, do these get complicated. The technology is what this is all about. I, for one, am glad I'm part of it, and thank you very much for your time.
Kathy, I find the geology of this business extremely interesting. And when I was at NDSU, I didn't study geology, but I studied economics. So if you get a chance, look at this rock. So when I do this, and I do this, I smell money, not oil. Our next speaker is Jim Brown. Jim's a good friend, and Jim and his team at Whiting have taken a small E&P company based out of Denver that started in North Dakota in about 99 or 2000 as a little E&P company looking for oil. They've now become the state's second largest oil producer, and I think they've got their eye on the #1 spot in the state. All these guys do is use their expertise and their engineering to find oil. They've taken this company, now they have 175 employees in North Dakota. They got a huge new office building, a gas plant about 14 miles south of Stanley, North Dakota, right out in the middle of the prairie. And these are high-skilled, high-wage jobs. So please welcome Jim Brown.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and I want to echo all of the thanks that the previous speakers before me have said to Senator Hoeven and all the group that has allowed this function to take place today. And Ron, I wish I'd have gone first because Kathy set the bar pretty high here, so it's going to be a tough act to follow. I always love to come to North Dakota. It's one of my favorite places. I've worked here since very early in my career. And, you know, this is the 47th least populated state in the nation. However, I grew up in the 50th least populated state in the nation. So I always have this little competition when I come here is can I outsmall the other person? So how I set the bar is I always say the high school I went to, I grew up in southeast Wyoming. The high school I went to in Wyoming graduated 408 people in 50 years. So I don't know if any of you have been to southeast Wyoming. I don't know what adjective we use to describe the landscape down there. Stark, bleak. But also what I say, I was 22 years old before I saw my first tree. So that gives you an idea of what southeast Wyoming is like. So I went to the University of Wyoming, and you may not know this, but the University of Wyoming is #1 in one thing. Its football field has the highest elevation of any Division I school in the nation. There's a sign in the end zone that says, "Welcome to 7,200 feet." So after you cram 4 years of education into 4.5 years, like I did, you're ready to get out of Laramie and go south. So upon graduation, Shell Oil Company said, "We'll take you to Houston, Texas." And I said, "Man, I'm your guy. I'm there." I should have studied Shell a little longer before I went to work for them. I didn't know that 4 months later I'd be living in Roy's Motel in Baker, Montana, working in the Williston Basin. I'm 500 miles further north than when I started this whole ordeal. So that didn't work very well, but anyway. I'm going to assume that a lot of folks in the audience perhaps do not know about Whiting Petroleum or who we are. Whiting was formed in 1980 by a gentleman, our namesake, Mr. Ken Whiting, who had a history of the oil business in Denver, first with Ladd Petroleum, then with Webb Resources, and then he in 1980, formed Whiting Petroleum. Whiting was privately held for 3 years. In 1983, it went through a merger with 2 other little penny stock companies in Denver, and Whiting was the surviving entity, and it was traded on the American Stock Exchange. So it was a public company for about 10 years. Whiting raised capital during that time by forming partnerships with the large insurance companies, Mass Mutual, State Street, Farm Bureau. We formed partnerships, used their money to go drill wells. In 1993, Ken Whiting was ready to take a reduced role, wanted to take life a little easier, so the company was sold to a Midwestern utility. Today, that utility is known as Alliant Energy, with headquarters in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Madison, Wisconsin. And we were simply just an investment for the utility. We didn't provide any of our, we were a natural gas company at the time, didn't provide any gas to the utility. We simply just were an investment for them. In just after everything happened on the 3-year. So 1983, 1993, 2003, Alliant Energy needed to raise some capital. They looked at all sorts of different things. They looked at selling the assets of Whiting. They looked at selling the company. And finally, November 20th, 2003, they spun us out into the public market via an IPO. And we're now traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol WLL. The great news on November 4th of 2003, we woke up. We no longer had Big Brother, the utility, looking over our shoulder. We were our own company, but we had $0 in the bank account. The utility took the entire proceeds and all of our cash from the IPO. So we were our own company, but we had no money. So it was a fun start. Since its history, since its founding, Whiting has grown. First, I got to get rid of this slide. This is just to be careful what I tell you. That's what the lawyers are trying to say with this one. Since its inception, Whiting has grown pretty much through acquisitions. That's how the company grew from 1983 on. And so early as Ron mentioned, 1999 and 2000, we got our foothold in the Williston Basin. In 2000, we purchased JN Energy out of Billings. We also purchased some assets from Collins and Ware, and we made an acquisition from Burlington out in what was called the Grasslands area, which is today what Whiting calls Lewis and Clark, where we're out drilling Three Forks wells, horizontal Three Forks wells, as Kathy just mentioned. In 2002, we bought all of the assets that Exxon had in North Dakota. And the two major fields that Exxon sold to us are Big Stick and North Elkhorn Ranch. And we still operate both of those fields today. As a matter of fact, we've just drilled 3 horizontal Three Forks wells right in the middle of Big Stick Field, which is out near the just north of Belfield. Belfield, thank you. So we've been in the Williston Basin for quite a while. After we went public in 2003, in 2005, we merged with a little company out in Salt Lake City called Equity Oil. Equity had a very nice acreage position out in Golden Valley and Billings counties of North Dakota. And so that, again, expanded our footprint into North Dakota and kind of, once again, gave us more of a foothold out there. Today, this is just a brief snapshot of Whiting, who we are. The high points on here, we are an oil company. We're 83% oil based on reserves. If you look at our production, we're 82% based on production. So there's a big emphasis in the industry to become oily. We really don't have to. We already are. Just our acquire, exploit, explore model that we've used. Like I've said, we've grown through acquisitions. Today, Whiting produces oil and gas in 14 states. I used to say we produced oil and gas in 14 states and 1 foreign country. However, earlier this year, we sold all of our properties in California, so I'm no longer able to use that line.